The Great Hall of Helion Prime Space Station had never seen so many species gathered in one place. And the noise of 1,000 different languages filled the air like music from another world. Dr. Vexus Thorn stood near the back of the medical conference hall. His forearms folded across his chest as he watched delegates from across the galaxy take their seats. The Kalari surgeon had lived for 300 years and had seen many things. But the sight of so many different beings discussing the art of healing still amazed him. "Welcome to the Galactic Medical Symposium," the announcer called out. Her voice translated instantly into every known language. "Today we discuss battlefield trauma and the evolution of combat medicine across species." Vexus found an empty seat next to a group of Tellurian doctors, their blue skin glowing softly under the station lights. They nodded at him with respect, for his reputation as a surgeon was known throughout the galaxy. The first few presentations were interesting enough. The Varax showed their methods of treating acid burns. The Kalari demonstrated new surgical techniques using gravity manipulation. And the Tellurians shared their advances in cellular regeneration. Then the humans took the stage. Vexus leaned forward slightly. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, having only achieved faster than light travel about 200 years ago. Most species viewed them as curious primitives who had somehow stumbled into the stars. A young woman in a crisp military uniform walked to the podium. Her name tag read, Captain Park Soo-min, United Earth Coalition Medical Corps. "Thank you for having us," she said, her voice calm and steady. "Today I will present a brief history of human battlefield medicine and the unique challenges we faced on our homeworld." The presentation began with images of ancient Earth. Vexus watched as the humans showed pictures of old wars, of soldiers in primitive cloth uniforms, of medical tents filled with the wounded. Then she showed the weapon. "This is what humans call a bayonet," Captain Park explained, displaying a long blade attached to the end of a rifle. For centuries, this was standard equipment for human soldiers. "We call it the blade gun." Laughter erupted from the audience. Viz turned to see a Morthian delegate nearly falling out of his chair with amusement. The insectoid being's mandibles clicked rapidly as he laughed. "Are you serious?" The Morthian called out, "Your species could not decide whether to shoot or stab." More laughter followed. Even the normally polite Tellurians were struggling to hide their smiles. "The humans are confused predators," someone shouted from the back. "They could not choose a method of killing, so they used both at once." Captain Park stood at the podium without moving. Her face showed no anger, no embarrassment. She simply waited for the laughter to die down. The bayonet served many purposes. She continued when the hall finally grew quiet. When ammunition ran out, soldiers could still fight. When enemies got too close for shooting, soldiers could still defend themselves. It was not confusion, it was adaptation. Adaptation to being primitive. Another voice called out, and the laughter started again. Vexus felt something strange in his chest. It might have been pity for the young human standing alone on that stage, facing the mockery of 1,000 advanced species. She was handling it well, he thought. Better than most would. The presentation continued. The few were paying attention. Delegates whispered and joked among themselves about the confused predators and their ridiculous weapons. When Captain Park finished and left the stage, Vexus noticed that she walked with her head high. There was no shame in her steps, no defeat in her posture. She sat down in the human section and began taking notes on the next presentation as if nothing had happened. Vexus made a mental note to speak with her later. Perhaps he could offer some kind words about her composure under pressure, but that conversation would have to wait. A loud alarm suddenly filled the hall, and every screen in the room flickered to the same emergency broadcast. "Attention, all medical personnel," the announcement blared. "A colony ship has been attacked near the disputed rim. 3,000 civilians are in danger. All available doctors and military escorts are ordered to report to the rescue vessel." Mercy's hand immediately. The hall exploded into motion. Doctors of every species rushed toward the exits. Their earlier amusement forgotten Vexus pushed through the crowd, his forearms helping him navigate the chaos. He had trained for moments like this, had spent centuries preparing to save lives in the worst conditions as he reached the docking bay. He saw Captain Park already there, checking equipment with a small group of human soldiers. There were only 8 of them, young men and women in combat gear. Dr. Vexus. A voice called out, and he turned to see the mission coordinator approaching. You will lead the medical team. Captain Park and her unit will provide security. Vexus looked at the 8 humans. They seemed so small compared to the alien soldiers gathering nearby, so fragile with their soft skin and single pair of arms. Is this all the human military could spare? He asked. We are enough, Captain Park answered, her voice carrying that same calm steadiness from her presentation. Vice doubted that very much, but there was no time for argument. 3,000 lives waited for them in the darkness of space as the rescue ship prepared for launch. Vexus noticed something strange. Each human soldier carried one of those primitive rifles with the blade attached. The sight made him shake his head. Even in a real emergency, he thought. The humans clung to their ridiculous weapons. He would soon learn how wrong he was. The Mercy's hand launched into the void, carrying 12 alien medics. 8 human soldiers and 1 Kaluri doctor who still believed that the beings beside him were nothing more than confused primitives. Playing at being warriors, the galaxy had mocked humanity for their blade guns. The galaxy was about to receive an education. The colony ship Wandering Star drifted in the darkness like a wounded animal, and Dr. Vexus felt his stomach tighten as the Mercy's hand approached the damaged vessel. Scorch marks covered the hole where weapons had torn through metal. Emergency lights flickered through shattered viewports. The ship was dying, and somewhere inside, 3,000 civilians were waiting for rescue. Boarding teams ready. The pilot announced over the intercom. Vexus gathered his medical team near the airlock. 12 doctors from 6 different species, each one carrying advanced healing equipment. They had the finest technology the galaxy could offer. Behind them stood the human security team. Captain Park Soo-min checked her rifle one final time, her fingers moving across the weapon with practiced ease. Her soldiers did the same, their faces serious and focused. Remember, a Morthian security officer said with a clicking laugh, let the real soldiers handle any fighting. Just try not to get in our way, humans. The Morthian team consisted of 8 warriors in full combat armor, their bodies covered in thick chitin and their claws equipped with plasma cutters. They looked like walking tanks compared to the smaller humans. Captain Park said nothing. She simply nodded and positioned her team near the back of the formation. The airlock opened with a hiss, and the smell of smoke and fear poured into the rescue ship. Vexus had smelled death before, but this was something else. This was the smell of innocence in danger. The teams moved through the corridors of the Wandering Star in careful formation. Morthian warriors at the front, alien medics in the middle, human soldiers at the back. Emergency lights painted everything in shades of red and orange. Survivors detected in Cargo Bay 7, a scanner reported. Approximately 2,000 life signs. They found them huddled in the massive storage area. Tellurian families mostly, their blue skin pale with terror. Children clung to their parents, and elderly beings sat against the walls with empty ice. Vexus immediately began organizing triage. The wounded were sorted by severity, and his medical team spread out to begin treatment. A young Tellurian girl tugged at his sleeve. She could not have been more than 6 years old, and her large eyes were filled with tears. Are the monsters coming back? She whispered. No, little one, Vexus said gently. You are safe now. He would regret those words. Captain Park approached him as he worked on a patient with burn wounds. Dr. Vexus, she said quietly, something is wrong. My team has been monitoring communications, and we are detecting an energy signature behind the third moon. The Varax Raiders? He asked, most likely hiding and waiting. Vexus felt cold. The Varax were among the most feared raiders in the galaxy. Insectoid beings with armor-like skin that could absorb energy weapons. They attacked colonies for slaves, preferring children who could be trained and sold. We should evacuate immediately, he said. We are trying. But the evacuation shuttles need 20 more minutes to dock properly. 20 minutes. It might as well have been 20 years. The attack came without warning. Explosions rocked the cargo bay as Varax. Breaching pods slammed into the hull. Metal screamed and tore apart. And suddenly, the air was filled with the clicking sounds of insectoid raiders pouring through the gaps. Contact! The Morthian leader shouted, and his team opened fire. Plasma bolts lit up the cargo bay like lightning, slamming into the advancing Varax. But something terrible happened. The Varax did not fall. Their chitinous armor absorbed the energy blasts, glowing briefly before dissipating the heat. The plasma weapons that could cut through starship hulls barely slowed them down. Impossible! The Morthian leader gasped, and then a Varax claw took his head off. Chaos erupted. The alien security forces scattered. Their advanced weapons, useless against enemies, evolved to survive energy attacks. Vexus watched in horror as the Morthian team was torn apart in seconds. The Varax did not kill everyone. They were selective. Their compound eyes scanning the crowd for specific targets. They were looking for the children. A raider grabbed the young Tellurian girl who had spoken to Vexus. She screamed as it lifted her off the ground. No! Vexus shouted, but he was a doctor, not a warrior. What could he do against these monsters? Then he heard the sound. It was a sharp metallic clicking, 8 times in perfect unison. He turned to see the human soldiers standing in a line, and each one had attached their blade to the end of their rifle. Fix bayonets, Captain Park commanded. And her voice was ice. The humans looked different now. Their soft faces had hardened into something Vexus did not recognize. Their postures had changed from relaxed to coiled, like predators preparing to strike. Formation Delta, Captain Park ordered. Priority targets are the ones holding children. We go in 3. Captain, one of her soldiers said. There are at least 50 of them. I can count, Sergeant Yoon. We go in 2. The young soldier, Yoon Ji-hoon, smiled. It was not a nice smile. 1. The humans charged. Vex had never seen anything like it. 8 soldiers sprinting directly at 50 armored raiders. Screaming battle cries in their strange Earth language. The first Varax raised its claw to strike. And Captain Park fired her rifle point blank into its face. The bullet did what plasma could not, punching through the eye socket and into the brain. Before the creature could fall, she drove her bayonet between the plates of its armor and twisted the raider holding the Tellurian. The girl shrieked as Sergeant Yoon slammed into it. His blade found the gap between chest plates and sank deep. The girl fell free, and Yoon was already moving to his next target. Vexus watched the humans fight, and he finally understood the blade gun was not confusion. It was refusal. When the enemy absorbed your bullets, you stabbed. When they blocked your blade, you shot. When they thought you were defeated, you proved them wrong. The Varax had evolved to defeat energy weapons. They had no answer for sharpened steel driven by human fury, but there were only 8 humans, and there were so many Varax. Dr. Vexus. Captain Park shouted as she fought. Get the civilians to the secondary airlock. We will hold them here. You cannot hold them. There are too many. She killed another raider with a thrust to the throat and looked at him with eyes that burned. Watch us. Dr. Vexus crouched behind a stack of cargo containers, his 4 hearts pounding in his chest as he watched the humans do the impossible. 8 soldiers against 50 raiders. And the humans were winning. No, winning was the wrong word. They were surviving, and in surviving, They were killing Captain Park's men moved like water and struck like lightning. Her rifle barked again and again, each shot finding gaps in Vorak's armor, and when enemies got too close, her bayonet finished what bullets started. Sergeant Yoon Ji-hoon fought beside her, his young face twisted into something savage and beautiful. He took a claw strike to his shoulder that would have dropped any other soldier, but he used the Vorak's own momentum against it, pulling the creature forward and driving his blade through its eye. Move! A human soldier shouted at the frozen alien medics. Get the civilians out now. Vexus finally remembered how to move his legs. He grabbed the young Tellurian girl and pushed her toward the secondary airlock where evacuation shuttles were docking. Everyone follow me, he commanded, and his voice cracked with fear. He could not hide. The cargo bay became a river of running civilians. Tellurian families clutching their children, elderly beings supported by the walking wounded, everyone desperate to reach safety behind them. The sounds of battle continued. Metal striking chitin, rifles firing, Vorak screeching. Humans shouting commands in their harsh earth language. VSS looked back and saw something that would haunt him forever. A human soldier, a woman whose name he never learned, went down under 3 Voraks at once. Her rifle was torn from her hands, her body pinned to the floor. But even then, even dying, she pulled a knife from her belt and kept stabbing until her arms stopped moving. The other humans did not stop to mourn. They could not afford that luxury. They simply closed ranks and kept fighting. Contact on the left. Someone shouted. More Voraks were pouring through a second breach in the hull. The raiders had brought reinforcements, and now the humans were being surrounded. Vess watched Captain Park make a decision in the span of a heartbeat. She pointed at 4 of her remaining soldiers, and then pointed at the evacuation route, Corridor 7C. She ordered, hold it until the shuttles launch. Nothing gets through. What about you, Captain? Sergeant Yoon and I will handle the rest. Now go. 4 humans peeled off from the main fight and sprinted toward the corridor. They passed Vexus without looking at him, their eyes focused only on the path ahead that left Captain Park and Sergeant Yoon facing at least 30 Voraks. This seems unfair, Yoon said, reloading his rifle with hands that did not shake. You are right, Park replied. They should have brought more. The 2 humans at Vexus should have run. Every instinct told him to flee, to get to safety with the civilians. But something held him in place. Some need to witness what was happening. Captain Park fought like a demon from human mythology. Her blade gun sang through the air, cutting and shooting and cutting again. She moved through the Voraks like a dancer, always flowing, never stopping. Sergeant Yoon was different. He was a hammer or she was a knife. He met the raiders head-on, absorbing blows that should have killed him and delivering strikes that absolutely did kill a Vorak's commander. Larger than the others and covered in battle scars, pushed through the ranks of its soldiers. It carried a weapon that glowed with cruel energy, and its compound eyes fixed on Captain Park. Human? It clicked in broken galactic common. Your species dies today. My species has been dying since we crawled out of the mud, Park answered. We are still here. She charged. The commander. Vexus could not believe what he was seeing. This small human woman, this confused predator that the galaxy had mocked just hours ago, threw herself at a creature 3 times her size with nothing but a rifle and a blade. The commander swung its energy weapon. Park ducked under it and drove her bayonet into the gap between the creature's arm and torso. The commander howled and backhanded her across the cargo bay. She hit a wall hard enough to crack the metal. Any other being would have stayed down. But Park pushed herself up, blood running from her nose, and smiled. Is that all you have? The commander roared and charged. Park waited until the last second and then dropped to one knee, bringing her rifle up. The bayonet caught the creature under the chin as its own. Momentum carried it forward. The blade punched through chitin and into the brain. The commander's body crashed to the ground. and Park was already moving to her next target, but the fight had cost time. And the Varax had used that time to surround Sergeant Yoon. Vexus watched as 5 raiders closed in on the young soldier. Yoon's rifle was empty, his bayonet chipped and dull from too many kills. He was wounded in a dozen places, his uniform soaked with blood both human and alien. Sergeant. Park screamed. Yoon looked at her and smiled that terrible smile again. Get the doctor out of here, Captain. I will buy you time. He drew a knife from his boot, the last weapon he had, and threw himself at the 5 Varax. Vexus finally understood what the blade gun truly meant. It was not a weapon. It was a philosophy. It was humanity's answer to a hostile universe that wanted them dead. When your bullets run out, use your blade. When your blade breaks, use your hands. When your hands fail, use your teeth. Never stop fighting, never surrender. Never give the enemy the satisfaction of an easy victory. Sergeant Yoon Ji-hoon killed 2 more Varax before they brought him down. And even then, even with claws through his chest, he kept his knife moving until his heart stopped. Captain Park grabbed Vexus by the arm and pulled him toward corridor 7C. Move, Doctor. His death means nothing if you die here. Vexus ran, and behind him, the body of a young human soldier lay surrounded by the enemies he had taken with him. Galaxy had laughed at humanity's primitive weapons. No one was laughing now. Corridor 7C stretched before them like a metal throat. Narrow and dark and filled with the sounds of approaching death. Dr. Vexus ran beside Captain Park, his 4 legs carrying him faster than he had moved in centuries. Behind them, the clicking of Varax claws echoed through the ship like a nightmare-given sound. They found the 4 human soldiers at the corridor junction. Private Kim Hannah stood at the front, her rifle raised and ready. Beside her were Corporal Baek Jun-ho, Private Lee Dae-young, and Private Choi Min-young. Report. Captain Park demanded. Civilians are loaded. Kim reported. Shuttles launch in 8 minutes. We have set up a barricade using cargo containers. It will not hold long. It does not need to hold long. It needs to hold long enough. Park looked at her soldiers, and something passed between them. It was a silent conversation that Vexus could not hear, but somehow understood. They knew they were going to die. Captain, Vexus said, and his voice surprised him with its steadiness. I am not leaving. Park turned to him with confusion in her eyes. Doctor, you need to get on that shuttle. You are too valuable to lose. I am a healer. My place is with the wounded. And right now, you are all wounded. He bent down and picked up a fallen rifle. It was human-made, heavy in his unfamiliar hands, with a long blade attached to the barrel. He had never held a weapon in 300 years of life. Do you know how to use that? Park asked. No. She almost smiled. It was the first crack in her soldier's mask that Vexus had seen. Point this end at the enemy, she said, tapping the barrel. Pull this trigger to shoot. Push forward to stab. That is all you need to know. That seems too simple. Killing is simple, Doctor. Staying alive is the hard part. The barricade was crude but effective. Cargo containers stacked 3 high across the corridor, with gaps for shooting through. It would slow the Varax, but not stop them. The clicking sounds grew louder. Here they come. Corporal Baek announced. Vexus peered through a gap in the barricade and felt his blood turn to ice. The corridor was filling with Varax, more than he could count. Their armored bodies caught the emergency lights and gleamed like wet stone. 40 at least, Private Lee reported. Maybe 50. We've killed more today, Park said. We can kill more now. She climbed onto the barricade and stood where every Varax could see her. It was madness, exposing herself like that. But Vexus understood. Immediately, she wanted them to see her. She wanted them to know that a human was waiting for them. My name is Park Soo-min, she shouted, her voice echoing down the corridor. Captain, United Earth Coalition. You killed my soldiers today. and I am going to make you pay for every single one." The Vorax response was a wave of clicking that sounded almost like laughter. Their commander, a scarred veteran with one eye missing, pushed to the front tiny human. It called back, "Your species is weak. You have soft skin and no armor. You die easily. Then come and kill me." The Vorax charged. What followed was the longest 8 minutes of Vexus's life. The humans fired through the gaps in the barricade. Their bullets found eyes and joints and throats. Vorax fell, but more kept coming, climbing over their dead to reach the defenders. Reloading. Private Kim shouted, and Corporal Beak stepped into her place without missing a beat. "They are climbing the left side." Private Choi called out Park was there in an instant, her bayonet catching a Vorax under the chin as it crested the barricade. She kicked the body back into its companions and fired 3 quick shots. Vexus found himself at the center of the barricade, his rifle shaking in his 4 hands. A Vorax face appeared in front of him, all mandibles and hatred, and his finger pulled the trigger on instinct. The creature's head snapped back, and it fell. He had killed something. He, Dr. Vexus Thorn, healer of 100 worlds, had taken a life. He did not have time to feel anything about it because another Vorax was already taking its place. "Push!" Park commanded, and the humans surged forward with their bayonets. The sound of blades striking chitin filled the air. Private Lee went down with a claw through his leg. Private Choi dragged him back while Corporal Beak covered them both. "How much time?" Park shouted. 4 minutes. Kim answered 4 minutes. It might as well have been 4 hours. The one-eyed commander broke through the barricade. Its massive claws tore a cargo container aside like it was made of paper, and suddenly the Vorax were flooding through the gap. "Fall back." Park ordered. "Fighting retreat. Keep them in the corridor." The humans moved as one, stepping backward while keeping their weapons pointed at the enemy. Vexus tried to copy them, but his legs were shaking too badly. Corporal Beak took a hit to the chest and kept fighting. Private Kim lost her rifle and drew a knife. Private Choi stood over the wounded Lee and refused to move. 2 minutes. The corridor was chaos. There were too many Vorax and not enough humans. Bodies piled up on both sides, and the floor became slick with mixed blood. Vexus felt a claw rake across his back. Pain exploded through his body, and he fell. Through blurring vision, he saw Captain Park standing over him, her bayonet flashing as she held back 3 raiders at once. "Get up, Doctor!" she screamed. "You do not get to die here." He tried. His 4 arms pushed against the floor, but his strength was gone. His species was not built for battle, not made for this kind of violence. Shuttles. Launching. Someone shouted, "Shuttles are away." Relief flooded through Vexus. The civilians were safe. The 3,000 innocent lives they had come to save were flying to freedom, but the corridor had fallen. The barricade was gone, and the Vorax were everywhere. Private Kim fell with a spear through her heart. Corporal Beak went down fighting, taking 2 raiders with him. Private Choi died protecting Private Lee, and then Lee died too. Captain Park stood alone. She was wounded in a dozen places, her uniform torn and soaked with blood. Her rifle was empty, her bayonet broken to half its length. She had nothing left, but she was still standing. The one-eyed commander approached her, its mandibles clicking with amusement. "Now you die." Human. Park looked at the monster before her, and then she looked at Vexus lying on the ground, and she smiled. "Not yet," she said. She raised her broken blade gun and charged one last time. The one-eyed commander was fast, but Captain Park was faster. She ducked under its sweeping claw and drove her broken bayonet into its remaining eye. The creature screamed, a sound like metal tearing, and stumbled backward into its own soldiers. Park did not stop. She could not stop. Stopping meant dying, and dying meant the Vorax would reach the wounded doctor behind her. She fought like nothing Vexus had ever seen. Her broken blade found gaps in armor again and again. When the blade stuck in a raider's throat, she used the rifle as a club. When the rifle shattered, she picked up a fallen Varak's claw and kept fighting. "You should have brought more soldiers." She screamed at the horde before her Vexus tried to count how many she killed in those final moments. He lost track after 12. The blinded commander found her by sound. Its claws closed around her arm and squeezed. Vexus heard bones break, heard Park gasp in pain. But she did not scream instead. She headbutted the creature, her skull slammed into its wounded eye socket. And the commander released her with a howl of agony. Park fell back against the corridor wall, her broken arm hanging uselessly at her side. The Varaks surrounded her. There were still at least 20 of them, and she had nothing left. No weapon, no strength, no way to keep fighting. Now, the commander hissed through its pain. "Now you die." Park looked at the monsters closing in around her. And then she looked at Vexus one last time. "Tell them," she whispered. "Tell them what humans are." She raised her one good fist and prepared to meet death standing. The wall behind the Voraks exploded in where Vexus had never been so happy to see a breach charge in his life. Coalition Marines poured through the gap, their weapons blazing. These were not energy weapons, but projectile guns, human-designed and human-made. The Varaks turned to face this new threat, and their confusion cost them everything. The Marines cut through them with brutal efficiency, their bayonets finishing what their bullets started. "Secure the corridor." A voice shouted, "Get the medics in here now." The one-eyed commander tried to rally its remaining soldiers, but a Marine sergeant put 3 rounds through its skull. The creature fell, and the last of the Varaks broke and ran. Vexus felt hands lifting him, felt medical equipment being pressed against his wounds. Voices asked him questions he could not understand. His vision was fading, his foreheart struggling to pump blood that kept spilling from his body. But before darkness took him, he saw one thing that burned itself into his memory forever. Captain Park Soo-min was sitting against the wall, surrounded by 17 Varak's bodies. Her broken bayonet was still clutched in her good hand. Her eyes were closed, and her chest was barely moving. A Marine knelt beside her and checked for a pulse. "She is alive," he shouted. "Get a stretcher over here now." Alive, Vexus thought as consciousness slipped away. She was still alive, impossible, wonderful human 6 months later. Dr. Vexus Thorn returned to Helion Prime. The scars on his back still ached when he moved, and he walked with a limp that the doctor said might never fully heal. But he was alive, and that was more than he had any right to expect. The Galactic Medical Symposium was in session again. Delegates from across the galaxy filled the Great Hall, just as they had before. The noise of 1,000 languages filled the air like music. Vexus walked to the front of the hall and stood at the podium. The crowd fell silent, for everyone knew his story. News of the Wandering Star rescue had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. 6 months ago, Vexus began. "I stood in this very hall and watched as you laughed at humanity. I watched as you mocked their primitive weapons and called them confused predators." He paused and looked out at the sea of alien faces. "I laughed too. I thought I knew what humans were. I was wrong." He pulled something from his coat and held it up for everyone to see. It was a bayonet, broken and stained with old blood. Captain Park's bayonet, recovered from the corridor where she had made her stand. This is what humans call a blade gun. You think it is primitive because it is simple. You think it is foolish because it does not make sense to your sophisticated minds. His voice grew stronger, but this weapon is a promise. It tells enemies something that no other weapon can say. It says, "When my ammunition runs out, I will cut you. When my blade breaks, I will use my hands. When my hands fail, I will use my teeth. I will not stop. I will never stop. Not while I am still breathing. Not while there is still something to protect." The hall was absolutely silent. 8 humans held a corridor against 50 Varaks. They held it for 8 minutes, long enough for 3,000 civilians to escape. 5 of those humans died, but they died standing. They died fighting. They died protecting strangers from a species they had never met. Vexus pointed at the entrance to the hall. One of them is here today. The doors opened, and Captain Park Soo-min walked in. She moved slowly. Her left arm was still in a regeneration cast, and she leaned on a cane. But she walked with her head high, and her eyes were the same calm, steady eyes that Vexus remembered from that first presentation. The hall erupted. Not with laughter this time, but with something else. Species that had mocked her stood and bowed. Beings that had called her primitive now looked at her with something close to awe, made her way to the podium, and stood beside Vexus. Captain, he said, on behalf of the Kalari Medical Corps, I wish to present you with the Healer's Medal. It has never been given to a non-medic before, but you earned it. He placed the golden medal around her neck. Doctor, Park said quietly, I am not a healer. I am a soldier. You kept more patients alive that day than any doctor I have ever known. You held that corridor so others could escape. That is healing of the highest order. She looked at the medal, and for the first time, Vexus saw something like emotion crack through her soldier's mask. Thank you, she whispered. Vess turned back to the crowd. Let this be a lesson to every species in this galaxy. Do not mock humanity for their simple weapons and soft skin. Do not underestimate them, because they are young among the stars. They carry blade guns because they refuse to ever be helpless. They fight until the end because surrender is not in their nature. He placed the broken bayonet on the podium. This weapon will be displayed in the Galactic War Museum. The plaque will read, Humanity's answer to superior firepower. The crowd roared with approval. Beings of every species stood and cheered for the small human woman who had taught them all what true strength really meant. Captain Park Soo-min stood at the podium and accepted their praise with the same quiet dignity she had shown when they laughed at her, because, in the end, humans did not need the galaxy's approval. They just needed a blade, a rifle, and something worth protecting, and they would never, ever stop fighting for it.